The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Alrighty, hello and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're calling from. Thank you for joining us today for our pre-summit webinar. Today's webinar call will be with Alison Lingane from Project Equity. Before I turn it over to Alison today, though, a few housekeeping notes from myself. First off, my name is Drew English. I'm the program coordinator here at the Exit Planning Institute. I wanted just to touch base on kind of the webinar series that we offer before I turn it over to Alison today. And so our pre-summit webinars are really for you all on in attendance today to hear who's going to be at our annual summit in September in Nashville, and to give a really brief introduction and just a little highlights of what to expect. And so Alison will be with us in Nashville in September, so hopefully everyone on the call will be joining us down there for our summit, and you could have a chance to talk to Alison a little bit more in depth in person at the end of September. For those who don't know about our summit, it is September 24th and 25th in Nashville, Tennessee. If you're looking for more information, you could visit exitplanningconference.com or just either call the EPI Global office or shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction. But for today's call, the webinar will be recorded, and so the recording of the call today will be sent out to you via email later today. So just look for an email from myself. And then also there's a questions or a chat box on your drop-down menu of GoToWebinar. We encourage questions and interaction throughout the call. So if you have any comments or questions you would like to input, just go ahead and type those in there. I'd be more than happy to then relay those over to Alison for the interaction and the questions. So just a little bit on Alison before I turn it over. She's the co-founder of Project Equity, which is a nonprofit that supports businesses to transition to employee ownership as the succession strategy for exiting business owners. She co-founded Project Equity after decades of senior leadership roles in mission-driven companies as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Alison, and she can kind of run us through her presentation today. And again, if there's any questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box, and I'll relay those over. So Alison, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Drew. And we're just thrilled to be able to be presenting through the Exit Planning Institute and participating in the summit as well in Nashville this September. So welcome, everyone. We're going to have a brief session today. We're going to wrap up by the half hour and hopefully leave a little bit of time for questions. So if we don't, as Drew mentioned, please go ahead and share your questions in that question box throughout, and then we'll pause before it's time to wrap to address them. So yeah, Project Equity, which is my organization, is a nonprofit, and we specialize in employee ownership exits, or sometimes we work with business owners that want to do some sort of a stakeholder engagement beyond, quote unquote, just the employees. But we're one of the nation's leading experts in employee ownership succession planning. And in this work, we often partner with advisors, I'm guessing like many of the folks on today's webinar, to support business owners to really look at and assess this less well-known succession option. Drew, if you go to the next slide, just so folks can get a sense of who I am here. So this is, employee ownership succession is not only very viable, but it's also very beneficial, both to the business owner and to the longevity of that business once that owner exits. And so what we do is right up front, there's a lot of exploration and learning. And for those businesses that then decide to move forward and decide that employee ownership is the right fit, Project Equity quarterbacks really all of the steps of that process, coordinating across the different experts involved, including ourselves. And we provide support both to the selling owner and to the new employee owners to ensure a successful transition. My aim today, in the brief time we have together, is to provide just a taste of why employee ownership exits really should be on the menu for you and your clients. And we're going to look at the myths around employee ownership and how we dispel them. We will also share at a very high level how Project Equity provides support, technical assistance, and training to make this model work for you, your clients, and for their employees. And of course, as Drew mentioned, this is just a preview. We will be having a session at the Exit Planning Summit in September. We're on the agenda first thing Monday morning for those of you all who will be making it to Nashville. It's Monday, September 24th. So we encourage you to come to that session for a deeper dive into everything that we can do together to provide a lasting legacy for your clients. Next slide. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of a reality check about the options for your clients' exit strategies. So we've published studies on our website that show the extent of baby boomer business ownership. And you guys, I know, live and breathe this and know it instinctively. But the numbers really show that nearly 1 out of every 2 businesses, privately held businesses with employees across the whole United States, is owned by a boomer. Next slide. And so what that means is there's 2.3 million businesses, and this affects nearly 25 million employees. And that translates to about 1 out of every 6 people who are employed and are in the workforce. So, again, this, that the numbers are staggering, but the point really that's relevant to today's conversation is that with so many businesses that need to find buyers, that means that for you, if there's a strategy that can help your client find a buyer literally right under their nose in the form of their employees, it's one that could be a great fit and should be looked at seriously. Next slide, please. So we want to share just a brief case study, really, of a business that Project Equity has worked with to help a husband-wife team turn to employee ownership as their long-term exit strategy. So we're gonna queue up just a little clip of Kirk Vartan, who's pictured here, the owner of a slice of New York, talking about what they did and why they turned to employee ownership. And just specific to their situation and needs, you'll hear about how they're doing the transition in stages. So first they sold the business to their employees, and now they're transitioning their roles. But really the reason that I chose this case study to share with you all is because you can really feel the importance of legacy to these business owners, to these sellers, and why that legacy was a real fit with employee ownership. Okay, so let me queue up this Kirk here.
Hello, my name's Kirk Vartan, and I just wanted to share a couple thoughts about the worker-owner cooperative conversion that we've embarked on. We've been working on this for, I think, upwards of 1.5 years is when we started, maybe even longer than that, when we first started researching this. And a little over 1 year ago is when we took it to the next level and, we started doing research. And we found a number of areas and spoke to a number of folks, and we got directed to Hillary and Alison. And Project Equity was the organization we spoke with and became part of their incubator process. And the exciting part is, they're starting out their new business. We're embarking on a kind of a new journey. And one of our priorities for us is to be an example for others to follow. So we already have an established brand. We've been in business for a little over 10 years now. And we have 2 businesses, 2 pizza shops. We're a pizza shop. And we want to be able to show other small businesses that if you wanted to give your employees the tools and the ability to do more, that is a successful strategy. And that ultimately it will do better for your business, do better for you, and we wanted to demonstrate that. So because we already have an established brand, we wanted to invest the time and energy into figuring out how can we do a conversion. We always wanted to do stock options and stuff like that when we started out. Both my wife and I are from corporate, and we know the value of business ownership, no matter how small it is. But back then, we didn't have any assets. It was the retail business. We'd never been in this industry before in terms of owning or operating a business, so we didn't know anything about it. We were highly encouraged not to do anything like that because it would just lead to false expectations and anxiety and resentment, or I'm not even sure. But needless to say, we never were able to accomplish that as a goal, and that was something we really wanted to do. So one of our biggest priorities has always been on our employees. We've been able to bonus our employees every year. We have a fairly non-conventional way to run our business. We don't have any management team. We were so frustrated with how corporate's management structure is people reporting to people to people to people. We wanted to create a flat organization, so I was the only manager. And we have upwards of 30 people right now, and the only manager that's there that has HR responsibility is me. Well, of course, my wife too, but I mean, I'm the only one that's actively in the business operations part from a day-to-day perspective. And when we started to find out about the cooperative process, the idea of empowerment and autonomous operation, but in a team environment, those are all things that we highlighted day one. Those are all things that are important to us. We believe in employee empowerment. We believe in a culture of giving people the opportunity to prove themselves and succeed, and reward based on performance. And the more they can help our business, the more the business can help them.
So I'm going to pause that there. I think you get a flavor for, really what Kirk and his wife were looking for when they decided to transition to employee ownership. And we have a link here on the slide that shows that links right to a video if you want to see a little bit of a shorter clip there of the whole summary of the process. But yeah, let's advance the next slide here, Drew. One of the things that you heard in that was that Kirk saying, I really want to be an example. I want to show others that this path is one that they should take. He often uses the word evangelism to say, I want to be an evangelist for employee ownership. And, well, why do we need more evangelism? Well, because the reality is that employee ownership succession is not a well-known option for business owners, or for professionals like you all who support business owners, certified exit planners, financial planners, etc. But in thinking about the number of businesses that are really on the market or coming on the market, that are maybe going to just close out because it's easier, but really that opportunity that we have to keep thriving businesses locally owned, and to really serve those retiring business owners who have dedicated their lives to building these companies. Employee ownership just has so much to offer. And when we talk to business owners, as I know you all do as well, who are nearing retirement, what we hear from them that they want, there's a short list of the top of the things that are most important to them, and really leaving a lasting legacy is front and center. It's right up there in terms of importance, alongside getting a fair price for the business. That fair price becomes the cornerstone of their retirement plan. And the good news is that selling the business to their employees can accomplish all of this, right? So market value, definitely. Big potential bonus is that there can be some really important and significant tax benefits to employee ownership sales. And then legacy, definitely. That box is checked. And for sure, also taking care of the people who've worked so hard to make the business possible. Okay, so, if this is such a great option, so important, why is it that everyone isn't doing this? Well, there's really two primary reasons. And the first is that it's simply not on the menu. And that's where you can help. And Project Equity is here to support you in any way in doing that. But getting this on the menu is the first step. And the second is that there are really a handful of myths that are getting in the way of employee ownership being considered. These are preconceived notions that we can easily dispel right up front. And so what you see here are the myths that we often start off our conversations with business owners around. And I'm going to briefly go through these. We'll delve into them in more depth in our session in Nashville, so that you'll have the confidence to knock them off one by one, get them out of the way, so that your clients can really have employee ownership become a real consideration for them. Okay, so just briefly, myth number one, my employees can't run the company. Well, we're not asking them to. Running the company is the job of the GM or the CEO. So employee ownership does not mean that you don't have managers and the right chain of command for that business in order to have it be effectively run. In fact, it's just the opposite. There is lots of data, lots of studies that demonstrate that employee-owned companies become all that much more effective because of the ownership culture that gets either deepened or developed. Myth number 2, my employees don't want to buy the company. And closely after that is my employees don't have the money to buy the company. So we're going to talk just in the next slide a bit about how the employee ownership transition works. But the key thing is that it's a different beast from the idea of a single employee or a handful of employees, often key managers buying the company is a model that folks are familiar with. But once you can explain how it works, you can knock these 2 concerns right out of the way. These are leveraged transactions, so employees aren't bringing the capital to the table themselves. So myth number 4, well, I'm not going to get a fair price for my company if I sell it to my employees. Well, that's another one we can get right out of the way. An employee ownership sale is a market value sale. And on top of that, there can be potentially very significant tax benefits. So unless you are working with a client who has a strategic buyer already in the wings, who's ready to offer, higher than market value, employee ownership really can deliver on the financial side. And then the last one here, oh gosh, it's complicated. It sounds hard. Well, as all of you know, selling your business, no matter how you're selling it, takes a level of effort, right? And with anything that is unfamiliar, it sounds more complex than something that is already familiar. But by partnering with organizations like Project Equity that can step up to provide that technical assistance and training needed to make it happen, we've had folks tell us that it actually can feel easier than some of the other options they were looking at. So again, we'll be delving deeper into all of these in September in Nashville. But next slide. What I'd like to do is just at the highest level here, break down really the simplest explanation of how employee ownership exits work or how the transactions really work. So at a high level, the business is buying itself out of the future profits. So the current owner or owners sells the business or its assets to a new employee-owned business. So if, for those of you who may already be familiar with employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, don't worry if you're not, but if you've heard that term or familiar with it, it works a little bit differently because in an ESOP, the owner sells the company shares to a trust rather than to the business, the employee-owned business, but it's a trust that owns the shares on behalf of the employees. Okay, so owner sells the business or its assets to a new employee-owned business, in case of an ESOP to a trust, which is financed usually by debt. So these are leveraged buyouts. And that debt is taken out by the company. So it's a cash flow loan, most typically, for those of you who are more familiar with financing. And then the new employee-owned company pays down the financing out of its future profits. So next slide. Let's go into now, just before kind of the last 5 or so minutes, so we can leave some time for questions, how Project Equity can help, what sort of we offer or bring to the table. So the way that we think about this is in sort of stages or steps. So the first one, obviously the first step is, oh gosh, what is this? I need to learn more. Let's talk about it. Let's learn. Let's understand. But once a business owner says, this looks interesting enough that I wanna figure out if it's feasible, we do a formal feasibility assessment, and the first piece of that is the financial feasibility. So how can this option work financially for your client? We will outline some of the key tax benefits. So what we do is we plug the historical financials into our analysis tool, and we support the development of future financial projections if those don't exist yet. And then we run scenarios to determine the debt burden of the business and some different structures that could make this work. If there's that financial feasibility doesn't have any red lights or blinking yellow lights, we like to say, we can then help your client develop and share really a straw model of what this employee ownership plan could look like with a small number of key employees to take the temperature, really, to assess interest. We also look at the leadership transition needs at a high level, create a timeline and roadmap for the entire process. Next slide. So once that assessment is complete, we move on to the next step, which is really preparing your client for the transition. So this is at the point where they're ready to move forward and they're committing to making this happen. So obviously that leadership transition is key. So we'll look at what the options are for GM or CEO leadership replacement from within. And if there aren't any options from within, looking at other contacts in the wings who could be good candidates. And also defining really what that GM role looks like. Sometimes this is the first time there's been a written job description, right, of that selling owner's role. We also advise on the sale agreement, can connect up to financing options. So we have good relationships with many lenders in this space who know how these transactions work. And then, of course, setting up the ownership structure. And throughout all of this, as I mentioned, we really quarterback with the lawyer, with the tax advisors to make sure that we're getting the right advice and the right expert support throughout the process. And then there's, employee education, employee ownership 101 training for your client and for the employees. So then once everything is set up and ready to go, next slide here, we move on to the final step, which is really, we call it either the conversion or the transaction. And so we support the execution of the sales agreement, help ensure that financing gets closed, finalize the bylaws or the operating agreement, the governance. Oftentimes this is the first time that a small business has a board of directors, and make sure that first board meeting gets set up and is effectively run. So next slide. So just summarizing here kind of this whole process, the timeline from start to finish can be 9 months to 18 months on average. Once they kick off with that feasibility assessment, it's about 12 months. And we found that this having a sense of the timing or timeline is especially important for business owners that want to see the transition happen at the close of a fiscal year or an accounting period. So if you're working with clients for whom you think this might be a good fit, we should definitely start talking now so that work can kick off before the end of this calendar year, so they can aim to close at the end of 2019. So next slide. So, we're here to help, however we can be of service to help you get on this on the menu with your clients. It's a powerful tool, really, for cementing the legacy of your client's company, also for retaining good jobs and for getting both a market price and potentially powerful tax benefits. So contact us. We have a self-schedule on our website, or on the next slide, we've got my contact information. And of course, join us at our in-person session in Nashville. So with that, let's turn it back to you, Drew.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. Appreciate it. And there weren't any questions that came in right away, so I was gonna, ask everyone if there's any questions. Please go ahead and type those in the question box. But Allison, just for you, what kind of questions do you normally get based on this, or can you give any more insight as to what people are really looking for and what you've seen, at least recently?
Yeah, we often get asked, well, what are the different forms of employee ownership? You saw that acronym ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. So just briefly, there's really 3 forms of employee ownership that we most typically help businesses with. And ESOP is an important one. For those of you who are familiar with ESOPs, they have some really powerful tax benefits. ESOPs are really great for companies that are big enough to make really managing the regulations in exchange for those tax benefits to make it worth it. So roughly 20 to 40 employees is kind of the low end of where an ESOP could work. We also support companies to transition to worker-owned cooperatives. So many folks are familiar with co-ops in the agricultural space. Those are co-ops of farmers coming together. So worker co-ops are workers who come together to own the business. And that's a form that works for any size company. And a slice of New York, we heard from Kirk Vartan, that was the form that they went with. And the third form really is a trust structure in the way that an ESOP is a trust, but without the tax benefits. But some companies want to be kind of really personalize how they do this for themselves and for their business, and the trust structure can offer that option for them.
Perfect. And it looks like we had a question come in. What is the process for vetting the group to see if there is a leader in the group that will work with the rest of the team, i.e. they will allow this individual to assume leadership in absence of the current owner?
Yeah, great question. So we always start with what does the company need in terms of that general manager or CEO role? What is that job description? And then, in the way that you would look at, hiring anybody for a job, you see who can step into that role based upon having the capabilities that job requires. And those capabilities are often a combination of hard skills and soft skills, right? So, hard skills in terms of leading the company, and soft skills in terms of that personal leadership and motivating the troops, so to speak. So we prefer to run sort of a process around that, because then it's clear what those capabilities are, what the company is hiring for, and then you can assess the candidate pool, including folks from within, based upon those capabilities.
Fantastic. Let me just check here. Alison, can you talk a bit about the culture shift during the transition?
Yeah, I really appreciate that all of these questions, but this one in particular is not one that I touched on much. Culture is critically important, and I mentioned briefly the volumes of studies, the data that has been looked at to really prove out that employee-owned companies outperform their competitors, outlast them in business cycle downturns, are more efficient. All of these qualities that we want for business to be successful, and those benefits really come with deep employee engagement. So you can just throw some ownership at your employees, but not really foster a culture of ownership, and you won't see those benefits. So it's both structure in terms of the actual ownership and culture that come together to form these very effective companies. And the ownership culture is, it's about understanding the business, understanding how it works. It's about understanding how my day-to-day role impacts the success of the business. And for those of you who are really into this, you may be familiar with the Great Game of Business, which is a terrific sort of system to kind of make it fun or gamify some ways that you can really make those connections take hold within your business.
Fantastic. And then, let's see here. Do you advocate including all or only a few of the employees when they become part of the successor group?
Yeah, so this question of who is a really important one. And what we advocate for is that the entire group of employees has access to ownership. And there's usually a you have to meet some requirements. For example, you have to have been there for a certain period of time, or be a full-time employee, or things like that. But that it's available to the full employee base. And again, that goes back to employee engagement and the benefits of ownership that really take hold when you've got that deep employee engagement. So yeah, we advocate for the full employee base, but that is not to be sort of confused with, well, who are the people who are perhaps going to be most active in terms of, if you do have an employee governance structure in place where employees are on the board and representing their fellow employees. So some people are going to be really excited to raise their hand and take those kinds of ownership, leadership roles. And for some people, being an owner and having that express itself in their day-to-day job without any additional responsibilities from a governance perspective is really what's the right fit for them. So it's ownership across the whole employee base, and then those special ownership leadership roles. Some folks are going to just naturally step into those and be excited to take those roles on.
Alrighty, and then last question for the day here. Do you see an advantage to transitions being staged exit for owner?
Yeah, it can be very advantageous for transitions to be staged, not required. I want to make that clear. You can still have a great transition if it's not staged, but a couple of the reasons that it can be advantageous. Number one is you separate out the changes, so you have less change at one time. So if you have, and this is what Kirk and his wife did at A Slice of New York, they first transitioned to employee ownership, and now they're transitioning their operational leadership roles. So they've separated out those transitions. The second reason is, and this is specific to the structure called an ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan, is if you are really working to maximize the tax benefits, doing a staged transition can really help you with that. So we don't have time to go into that right now, but for those of you who want to learn more about ESOPs, we can delve into that a bit later on.
Fantastic. Well, again, if there's any additional questions or you're looking for a little bit more insight, you see Alison's email and phone number there on the screen. You could also reach out to myself here at EPI Global. I could be more than happy to direct those questions over to Alison so we can get those answered for you. But like you see there on the screen as well, Alison will be presenting at our summit in September, on September 24th, down in Nashville, Tennessee. Again, if you're looking for more information, please check out exitplanningconference.com, or you can give us a call here at EPI Global, and we'd be more than happy to share that information with you. But for today, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Alison, thank you very much for spending some time with us, giving us a little bit of an insight on what to expect about your presentation on Monday, September 24th down in Nashville. Greatly appreciate all the questions, and if there's anything I could do in the meantime for anybody, please don't hesitate to ask. But Alison, is there anything you would like to add before we conclude today?
Yeah, just to thank everyone for joining the conversation today, and to emphasize, don't hesitate to reach out if you want to learn more or connect up with us directly.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll go ahead and conclude and get everyone back into their busy days and busy weeks. But Alison, thank you very much. I look forward to working with you as we lean up here, about 54 days away from the summit. And if there's anything I could do for anyone in the meantime, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you so much, Drew.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of the day, everybody.